You hear the name Steve Jobs, and what do you think of? Probably the black turtleneck, right? The iconic product launches, this reality distorting level of passion. He was, without a doubt, a visionary who changed our world. But he was also a huge contradiction. So, what made the man who sought different so different? Well, to really get it, you have to start with a failure. I mean, just think about that question for a second. How do you get fired from the company you started? It sounds impossible, but it's not a riddle. It's the unbelievable central drama of Steve Jobs' career. And honestly, it's the key to understanding his entire story. So let's start at the beginning. Our story doesn't kick off in some fancy boardroom. Nope. It starts in the middle of the counterculture of 1970s California. It's really a tale of rebellion, of two buddies with a shared love for electronics and a little bit of mischief who ended up starting a revolution in a suburban garage. Okay, so Steve Jobs was born in '55 and adopted. He was always a brilliant kid, but let's just say he was a bit of a handful. Then in 1971, he meets Steve Wozniak, who was a flat-out electronics genius. And their very first project together, it tells you everything you need to know. They built and sold these blue boxes, which were totally illegal devices that let you make free long-distance phone calls. It was way more than just a prank. It was their first taste of taking on a giant system and winning. And by '76, they channeled all that energy into Apple Computer, right there in his parents' garage. Now, this is what's so cool. The vision. You have to remember, back then, computers were these giant room-sized machines for huge corporations, or they were these really confusing kits for hobbyists. Woz and Jobs had this completely radical idea. They wanted to build a computer that was personal, that was friendly, that anyone could use, a tool for the rest of us. As Apple started to take off, Jobs knew he needed someone with real corporate chops. But how does a young, long-haired guy from California convince a top executive from Pepsi, John Scully, to come join his little startup? Well, he hits him with this legendary question. This is a perfect example of what people called his reality distortion field, this insane, charismatic ability to make you believe in whatever vision he was selling. And wow, did that vision pay off. When Apple went public in 1980, it was the biggest IPO since Ford Motor Company. Just like that, overnight, it created around 300 millionaires. Apple wasn't just another company, it was a full-blown phenomenon. And when you're a phenomenon, you've got to take on the biggest giant in the room. To launch their next big product, the Macintosh, Jobs didn't just buy a commercial, he commissioned a masterpiece. This epic Super Bowl ad, directed by Ridley Scott, showed this lone hero shattering a screen with a droning Orwellian Big Brother on it. The message was crystal clear. IBM is the old guard, Macintosh is freedom. But here's the twist. The triumphant rebel, the hero of our story, was about to face a coup inside his own kingdom. The Macintosh didn't sell as well as they'd hoped, and that revolutionary spirit that built Apple was about to collide head-on with corporate reality. So it all came down to this epic clash between these two guys. On one side, you have Steve Jobs, intense, obsessed with product and innovation, pushing for his perfect, closed Macintosh system. And on the other side, you have John Scully, the guy he hired, buttoned up, focused on marketing and profits, and wanting to stick with the more successful Apple II. It was a total collision of worldviews. And in 1985, the whole thing just exploded. Jobs tried to get Scully removed, but Scully found out, called a boardroom meeting, and basically told the board, it's him or me. They chose Scully. And just like that, Steve Jobs was stripped of all his duties. A few months later, he was gone from the company he'd poured his soul into. So he's fired. Exiled, most people would have just disappeared, but not Steve Jobs. He entered what people call his wilderness years. But this wasn't a time for him to get lost. It was a time of incredible creativity. In his own words, it was the best thing that ever could have happened to him. His first move was a new company called Next. He wanted to build the most advanced computer in the world for schools and researchers. Commercially, it was a total failure, way too expensive. But the technology inside that beautiful black cube, oh, it was a masterpiece. Its software was light years ahead of everything else. It was a secret weapon, just waiting. At the exact same time, he bought a tiny, struggling computer graphics group from George Lucas for about $10 million. He called it Pixar. He just saw something in this little group that nobody else did. He believed in their crazy dream of making the world's first fully computer-animated movie, and he funded it with his own money, even when it was losing cash like crazy. And that belief, it paid off in a way no one could have imagined. After the wild success of Toy Story, Disney bought Pixar in 2006 for a staggering $7.4 billion. The deal didn't just prove him right, it made him Disney's largest single shareholder. The guy kicked out into the wilderness had just built a whole new empire. So all of this is building to what is, without a doubt, the greatest comeback story in business history. By the mid-90s, the Apple that had fired Jobs was dying. It was bloated, it was confusing, and it was literally weeks away from going bankrupt. It needed a miracle.
And in the most perfect, ironic twist of fate, where did Apple find its salvation? In the company built by the man it had kicked out. Apple desperately needed a new operating system, so they bought Next. And you know who came along with the software? Steve Jobs. He came back, at first just as an advisor, but everybody knew the king was back.
One of the very first things he did was launch the Think Different ad campaign. And get this, it didn't show a single product. It just showed pictures of people like Einstein, Gandhi, Picasso. This wasn't just an ad, it was a mission statement. Jobs was reminding Apple and the entire world what the company was supposed to stand for. Once he took over as CEO, he was absolutely ruthless. He looked at Apple's messy, confusing product line and just started cutting things. He slashed it down to just 4 core products. His philosophy was simple. Stop doing a dozen things okay and do a few things insanely well. Design and innovation, that was the soul of Apple again. And that intense focus, it unleashed the greatest run of hit products we have ever seen. First, the iMac, that colorful computer that literally saved the company. Then the iPod, which put 1,000 songs in your pocket and completely changed music. After that, the iPhone, which didn't just improve the phone, it reinvented it. And finally, the iPad, which created a whole new category of device we didn't even know we needed. You know, back in 2005, after he'd been diagnosed with pancreatic cancer, Jobs gave this incredible speech at Stanford. He shared this philosophy, which really came from him facing his own mortality. It's what gave him the guts to drop out of college, to start Apple in the first place, and to come back from being fired. Stay hungry, stay foolish. That wasn't just a catchy phrase. It was literally the operating system of his life. Steve Jobs passed away in 2011. According to his sister, these were his final words. They're so simple, a little mysterious, and just full of wonder. You know, maybe the man who spent his entire life creating the future just saw one last incredible thing, a perfect final testament to a life spent thinking different.